Welcome to lesson 7.1, circumference of a circle. Today our objective, I can determine the radius, diameter, and circumference of a circle. Whoa, Mrs. Wall, that is a lot of vocabulary that I'm not familiar with. So let's take a recap. So first, we have what we call the diameter of a circle. So the diameter of a circle is the distance across a circle through its center. So if we look at our diagram here, this line is our diameter. It's going across the circle from one side to the other through the center. Okay, so a diameter can be drawn a lot of different ways. So my pink line there is the diameter, but really any line that I draw through the center of the circle from one edge to the other is a diameter. Okay, so all the way across the circle is the diameter. Well, what is a radius then? A radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside. So if we look from our center of our circle to the outside, that is our radius. And the radius can be just like the diameter from the center of the circle to any outside part of the circle. Okay, so a cool thing is if the diameter is all the way across the circle and the radius is halfway across the circle, that means that the diameter is twice as big as the radius, and that means that the radius is half of the diameter. Because really, when we look at this, if we were to take this radius line here, and if we were to draw it up here, well, there's my radius. But really, if I draw it again over here, it would give me my diameter. So really what that means is that 2 of my radiuses is 1 of my diameter. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to calculate the diameter and the radius given circles. So we're just going to identify them, okay? So let's look at the first one together. So the radius of this one, well, this one is halfway across the circle from the center to the outside, so that is the radius. So radius is 5 millimeters. Well, if the radius is 5, that means the diameter is going to be twice the radius. The diameter is going to be my blue line here. So twice the radius is going to be 10. 5 times 2 is 10, so my diameter is 10. All right, if we look at the next one, all the way across the circle is that the radius of the diameter. All the way across is the diameter, so that's going to be 12 centimeters. Now remember, the radius is half of that. The radius is from the center to the outside, so that means my radius here would be half of 12, which is 6 centimeters. Next one, I have from the outside to the center. That is my radius. So my radius is 9 meters. So my diameter would be if I were to take this and go all the way across. So my diameter is really my 9 meters here and my 9 meters from here to the outside. So together that is 18 meters. Last one, all the way across is 16 kilometers. So from one edge to the other, that is my diameter. So that means my radius is going to be half of that. So half of 16 is 8. Woo, Mrs. Wall. So here we go. So I have 8 kilometers. All right, so what I would like you to do is go ahead and try E through H on your own. So go ahead, pause the video if you haven't done so already, and try those 4. All right, welcome. If we were to take a look, you should have got 11 and 22, 15 and 30, 13 and 26, 7 and 14. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look. Sometimes we don't have a picture. Actually, a lot of times we don't have a picture. Instead, we have words and sentences when we talk about circles. So this one says, what is the diameter of a circle with a radius of 1.5 inches? So as long as I know the radius is halfway across the circle and that the diameter is 2 times the radius, I know that it's going to be 2 times my 1.5, which is a total of 3 inches for my diameter. If you want to, you could draw a picture knowing that the radius here is 1.5, and then you realize you have to have 2 of those to get 3. That's absolutely okay. Next one, what is the radius of a circle with a diameter of 7 feet? Well, if I were to draw my circle here, my diameter is all the way across and it's 7. I know my radius is half of that. So half of 7 is 3.5 feet. Okay. All right, go ahead and flip the page. Now that we have a good idea of what radius and diameter are, now we can look at what we call the circumference of a circle. So just like any shape, like a square or a rectangle or a triangle, we can calculate its perimeter. And the perimeter of a shape is, remember, the distance around the shape. So what is the circumference? The circumference is just the distance around a circle. So it's the distance around a circle. So when I look at this diagram here, my circumference is how far around the circle is. It's also known, and I'll put in parentheses here, it's the perimeter of the circle, right? It's all the outside. So looking at this, we can calculate the circumference of a circle, or the perimeter of a circle. Like we can calculate the perimeter of any other shape. But to do that, we need a special number. And this special number is what we call pi. Okay, and this symbol is the symbol that we use to represent pi. And how we write it in math is pi, not with an E, even though that's really tasty. So we're going to use this symbol a lot. And this symbol is very important. It is the ratio of the circumference to the diameter. So really what's it saying is that pi is equal to, if I take my circumference and I divide it by my diameter, I will always get pi. Super cool. So pi is what we call an irrational number. And irrational numbers go on forever. So you may have heard people talk about pi before. If we think about it, pi is 3.14159, and it keeps on going forever. Mrs. Wall, this doesn't make sense. How can a number keep going forever? Well, what happens is because it's the ratio of the circumference to the diameter, what that means is if pi is really what we use for an approximation is 3.14. So what that means is if I take my diameter, which is this line right here in my circle, and if I were to take that line, if I were to wrap it around my circle, so I would wrap it around 1, 2, 3 times, but it's not all the way there. It doesn't go all the way around my circle. So because that happens, we have what we call this irrational number pi. So we use pi when we're calculating the circumference of a circle because it's that little extra piece that we need when we talk about the diameter of it. Okay, so it's really hard to describe pi when I'm not with you, but I'm really hoping that what I just explained will help you until I get back. Okay, so another super cool thing is, if you haven't noticed already, there is a pi button on your calculator. What, Mrs. Wall? Yeah, mind blown. So if we look on our calculator here, you'll see this button right here. That is your pi button. So if I were to press that for a moment and then hit enter, you'll see that I get 3.141595624, and it can't keep going in a calculator because the screen is only so big, but it would continue going if it were possible. Okay, so we're going to use this pi button on our calculator to help us when we're using this calculation. So the circumference formula. So a circumference is like what we just talked about. It is pi times the diameter. So we're taking the diameter and we're multiplying it pi number of times, which is really cool. Another way to write that is circumference equals 2 pi r, because really the diameter is twice the radius, right? So this is the same thing as putting pi times d. So these are two formulas that we use, and we can decide which one to use based on what information we're given. Okay, and a cool way to remember this formula, you ready? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, circumference equals 2 pi r. That will help you. Sing it all the time. It's beautiful. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, circumference equals 2 pi r. Beautiful. Okay, so let's find some examples with circumference. So we'll see it multiple ways. So if you look at this first one, it says find the circumference in terms of pi. So when you see this in terms of pi, that means you're going to leave pi in the answer. So let's look. I'm given my radius or my diameter here. I'm given my diameter, so my d equals 18. So that can help me decide which formula I'm going to use. I have my diameter, so I'm going to use my pi d formula. So I have c equals pi times d. Well, if my diameter is 18, I can plug that in here. So I'm going to write d equals 18 over here. So when I plug in 18 for d, I get circumference equals pi times 18. Now, the weird thing is in math, we like to put our numbers in front of our variables. And although pi is a number, we always write pi after the constant. So in terms of pi, it's asking for 18 pi. That's it. We just plugged in our diameter. That's pretty cool. Now it says to the nearest tenth. So when that happens, you take your 18 pi and you plug it into your calculator. So if I were to get back out my calculator and click clear, I could write 18. Now there's nothing going on right here, right? There's no operation. So that really means we're multiplying. So you could do 18 times and then hit your pi symbol. And you will always get a decimal because pi is a decimal. So if we look here, we get 56.5 when we round to the nearest tenth centimeters. So I'm going to write that right here, 56.5 centimeters. Okay, now because there is no operation there, even though we know it's multiplication, the super cool thing that your calculator does is if you just were to write 18 pi without multiplying, you'd still get the same thing because it knows that you're multiplying. Okay? So let's look at the next one. Find the circumference of a circle with a diameter of 5 meters. So d equals 5. So over here, I'm going to write d equals 5. So diameter, well, that's going to be circumference equals pi d. And a cool way to remember this, circumference equals pi d. Get it? Okay, so I'm going to write my formula. Circumference equals pi d. So then I have circumference equals pi. Now my diameter is 5 here, so I'm going to plug in 5. So circumference equals 5 pi. That is in terms of pi. That's all I'm doing is plugging in 5 for d. Now I have to round to the nearest hundredth. So on my calculator, I'm going to hit clear. I'm going to do 5 pi. That's all I need to do. And when I do that, I get 15.7. Now be careful. It says to the nearest hundredth, so it's 2 decimal places. So 7, this is going to round up to a 1. So my answer here is going to be 15.71 meters. All right, go ahead and flip the page when you're ready. All right, so we just calculated that with diameter. Now let's look at some examples with radius. So this one says find the circumference. Well, I'm given my radius here because I know that a radius is halfway across the circle. So when I'm singing my song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, circumference equals 2 pi r, I'm going to write that right here for my formula. So it's going to be circumference equals 2 pi r. So now my radius is 17, so I can plug that in for r. So I have circumference equals 2 pi times 17. Well, 17 times 2 is 34, so it's going to be circumference equals 34 pi. And because it says in terms of pi, that's all I have to do. So now to the nearest tenth, that means I'm going to take 34 pi, plug in my calculator. Well, 34 pi. I get 106, and I have to round to the nearest tenth, 106.8 centimeters. Beautiful. All right, next one. Let's look at circumference of a circle that has a radius of 3. So r equals 3. All right, in terms of pi, twinkle, twinkle, little star, circumference equals 2 pi r. Okay, so my r is 3. C equals 2 pi. I'm replacing r with 3. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, and I can leave my pi right there because it says in terms of pi. So now the next one to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. So in my calculator, I have 6 times pi. And you should get 18.849. So when I round to the nearest hundredth, I get 18.8. It's going to round up to a 5. So I get 18.85 inches. And that's it. All right. So what I want you to do now is I want you to try the practice. Now with the practice, be careful. Some of them say in terms of pi, like the first one. So all you have to do is do it this way. Other ones say rounding. So be very careful when you work on this page and the next page as well. Okay? So when you're done with that, I want you to go ahead and hit resume on this video. Okay, so work on the practice. When you're done, hit resume to make sure that your answers match mine. Remember, even though I'm not there, this is a time for you to practice, okay? You're still learning. So when I ask you to do the practice on your own, please take it seriously, okay? And when you're done, I want you to go ahead and press play. All right, welcome back. So let's take a look. These were your answers. Go ahead and pause the video to see if your answers are the same as mine or not, and make any mistakes that you need to. And then this is my back page, so I'll zoom out for you. So make sure, again, to pause the video and check your answers to see if you got the same thing that I did. The last one is right here as well. Okay, so now for the rest of your time, you have a quizzes. Okay, every day that I'm gone, you're going to have a quizzes as an exit ticket, so you have to complete them. So go ahead and log on to Quizzes. The substitute will give you your code. And if you get done with that early, you can always go on to Quizlet and study your vocabulary on Schoology that has to do with circles, because we learned a lot. We learned about circumference, diameter, radius, pi even. I wish I could talk more about pi. I could go on and on forever about that. Get it? Because it's irrational. All right. Well, I hope you had a great time. Bye.